Okay. Hi, insellimnek Isabel. Illum l-ħar program sensiela ta' Let the Sunshine In, kollaborazzjoni mal YMCA, Listenin to You u professjonisti oħrajn fil-qasam tas-saħħa mentali. Lan tagħna huwa li naqsmu l-esperjenzi tagħna magħkom u nagħtukom iktar support u suġġetti differenti fil-ħajja tagħna. Mela kif semmejt l-ewwel illum għandna lil Isabel Jakobsen magħna li hija psychotherapist għandha degree in Youth Studies kif ukoll masters fil-gestalt psychotherapy. Tista' tina forsi iktar informazzjoni, tintroduċi lilek innifsek ukoll.
Għana kien psychotherapist, l-ewwel professjoni tiegħi kienet youth work, għax nħoss ħafna naħdem speċjalment ma' deviant behavior, dejjem kelli gruppi ta' żgħażagħ li kienu għanegħdu mhux tal-norma, ma dejjem żgħażagħ. U l-affarijiet li jġibu żgħażagħ magħhom. U deċidejt li nkompli psychotherapy għax il-ment li nista' nagħti iżjed li kont qed nagħti qabel. Għax għalkemm fil-youth work titgħallem ħafna fuq iż-żgħażagħ, imma l-element tal-psikoloġija ħassejt li stajt nikkontribwixxi iżjed.
Kemm ilek taħdem bħala psychotherapist?
Naħseb ħana kważi 6 snin biex birthday.
Okay, xogħol li jogħġbok, għandek passion
Iva ħafna. Meta inti tara li bniedem qiegħed jinbidel ftit, però qiegħed sejjer towards his destination, tipo kif fejn irid jasal. Laqas nista' nispjega il-feeling għax huwa sabiħ li bniedem jgħidlek tipo tajtni il-ġwiena inti għax issa hija ħaġa sabiħa li inti tagħti li anka hija l-epitome tal-youth work, għax inti fil-youth work you empower. Allura inti l-bniedem mhux qed tgħidu x'jagħmel, qed tieħu idejat u they go very much hand in hand, psychotherapy u youth work.
Mela, just for the sake of our viewers who are not multi-speaking, just recap what we just said earlier on. So today is the last program in the series of Let the Sunshine In, collaboration with Listenin to You, YMCA, and other professionals in the mental health sector. Today we have Isabel Jakobsen with us. She's a psychotherapist and has worked, has a degree in studies as well, and works with a lot of people who suffer from eating disorders. So the title to today's program is Understanding Eating Disorders and Loving Oneself in the Process. So as you know, it's obvious that today we'll be talking about eating disorders. So we can start straight away. So the program today will be in English. We will switch to Maltese every now and then, but we decided today to have the program more in English. So what is an eating disorder? Maybe you could share some of your experiences with us working with individuals with eating disorders. So, x'inhu huwa eating disorder? Isabel forsi se taqsam ma naftik mill-esperjenzi tiegħek. As you wish.
So an eating disorder, although the word eating is in it, it goes in much deeper than just food. It's when a person is experiencing psychological difficulties outside in his life. For example, he went through a trauma, and as a way of expressing his difficulties, he transfers it into food. So anything got to do with food, he needs to control. One must also say that it is very important that if an eating disorder is present, there needs to be medical attention as well as psychological help, because it is not something to be taken lightly. I will speak from my experience. We find this that a lot of people just say, oh, isn't it just a matter of them eating or
sorting out their diet or their...
Yes, it is not just that, because it is mental. You do not, in fact, it is one of the mental health disorders in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So it's seen as a medical condition. So not something that you can just say you can do easily on your own. We have had people, but rarely, that have managed with just psychotherapy, but normally there needs to be an interdisciplinary team.
So as I was reading up, and it's more your area of expertise, the three main types seem to be the anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. in your opinion, from working with people suffering from these conditions, is there one there's a higher rate in one more than the other? Is like anorexia more prominent in Malta or binge eating?
From my experience with the group that I have worked with, I've experienced more people with anorexia because it's my area which I feel more well versed in, although I've worked with others, and binging and the overeaters, but mostly I've been mostly focusing on anorexia nervosa and the binging, yes.
Common signs for people who have an eating disorder, what should they look at? So min qed prosekwieta li għandu eating disorder, x'inhu ma sintomi marbutin ma' eating disorder?
So generally these people bring excuses whenever there is food around. So for example, normally it happens in teenagers. This is the onset of it. It's more prevalent in girls than in boys, although 1/5 is a male. So don't be misled, okay? You always need to be on the lookout.
Because we tend to hear that it's like a young women's disease.
No, it's not only. I think with in the last years that I've been working with people in this condition, there's always been a ratio of like from a 1 to 5, give and take, you know. And the onset is puberty, because in puberty people are growing, their body is developing, and it could either be a comment about somebody who says, "Oh, you're looking," because their hips get rounder, their breasts get fuller, and the boys get, you know, a bit taller, or, you know, even just a comment. To the negative side, like people like to say, "Enough attention, you're gaining weight." I mean, it's not something, you know.
Or this is, I'm just going back to my auntie, for example, or my nana.
"Oh,
She would tell me your face is getting fuller, and as a young person, I think that was that was an alarm rather than a compliment.
The worst thing you can tell a person with anorexia, for example, is you're looking well, because they would immediately translate it that I'm looking bigger. Okay. Don't forget that these people, whenever they look in the mirror, they already perceive themselves to be bigger than they already are. In fact, whenever they go to a rehabilitation center, no mirror is given except for the face. Issa, you asked me about traits and symptoms. For example, people who go, I'm going to basically talk about the more the anorexic or the purges, because I have more experience with that, although I do have with the others, but this is more. So, for example, you notice that whenever you offer them food, they either come up with the excuse of saying, "No, I've already eaten outside," or "I've eaten at Nana," or "went out to eat." And then if you really check about it, it wouldn't be true. Or they bring excuses: "I'm feeling sick, I'm very tired, I don't want to eat," or they're very selective with their foods. For example, salads only and nothing fatty, which they perceive as not good for them. Okay, especially around most of these people have what we call fear food.
Okay, so it could be particular foods.
Yes, and it would be very apparent as well if they go to the bathroom after they eat. So you need to notice this and go behind the door. So having said this, don't alarm yourself if your child tells you, "Listen, I need to go to the bathroom." But if it's done repeatedly, perhaps you could go behind the door, because if they purge you, you're listening. Having said this, they could be taking laxatives, which you wouldn't know, because if they go to a pharmacy and they're 16, the pharmacist will very much easily give it to them, you know. Hair, for example, you notice that they're losing weight or they're gaining weight if it's either no control over food, for example, and the ones who overeat. It's like there's a food addiction. So you give them a plate, or they lie the other way. They say, "No, I only have a little piece of bread," and they eat the whole plate, and then after that they just don't stop eating, nibbling this and nibbling that and the other, you know. Or hiding food. You find food under the bed or in the cupboards, especially with the ones who don't eat, you know, or they put them in bags.
It's almost like they're trying to fill a void, literally, metaphorically.
Yes, that's what it is.
In this way.
In fact, they explain it like this. It's like a missing piece inside of them. They wouldn't be so aware, but when you do therapy with this cohort, you realize that there is something related to either a trauma or what they perceived as a trauma, because people with this type of condition they have what we call personality traits. I don't want to put people in boxes, but the personality traits, they would be what we would say in Maltese, coming on big bar. It's like they take things out of proportion because they're more sensitive, because they think very seriously, they're perfectionists. But then it doesn't mean that everybody who's a perfectionist will have an eating disorder. So we have to be very careful. Okay? We as psychotherapists cannot diagnose. Although when I see clients, it's very clear, especially with anorexia, that they do have an eating disorder. We always have to refer to a psychiatrist or to your family doctor, who will refer you to a psychiatrist, because there they have special medication. Because as I mentioned before, the medication is a part of the healing. And the nutritionist, it's a whole team that has to.
I mean, we both worked at eating disorder clinic in Malta. So I remember part of the initial part of work was, like you said, not diagnosing, but an assessment. And then sort of reaching out to our colleagues, nutritionists, occupational therapists, science, psychiatrists, to obviously have a team to try and support the person as they go along. What about families? I mean, do you think this is something that is a family trait? I mean, if you have someone in the family with it, is there more?
Yeah, it's genetic. In fact, I was just reading up because I needed to brush up. Although I work in the fields, although I put up with it, I just read a research which is ongoing at the moment in America, that they tested twins, and the chances of one twin having it, the other twin has a 50% chance of having this. Having said this, not all twins will have it, of course. I mean, in America, 20 million women have it and 10 million men has had it. So any type of eating disorder, I'm saying, okay? Having said this, there's a positive side to it, because from 50 to 70% can heal if given the adequate medication and support that the environment. Yes.
Okay. So we're talking about environment. It plays a large role. Pressure to look good, to lose weight, to put on weight.
Yes.
What are we talking about? Social media, peer pressure? What are the?
In fact, if perhaps we remember, there was a time, even on social media, where models had to be that skinny anorexic look, we call it. Now they're not allowed anymore. The size became size zero. Yes, unfortunately, especially because it happens in puberty, I work a lot with young people, teenagers especially, which is the onset. I think they are blessed, and I tell them this, that they got it in the very beginning, although it would have been present even before, probably, especially if there was a trauma present. But there is a difference when clients come and they're in their 40s and their 50s. It's a bit more difficult. It's a way of life, and they learn how to cope and live with it, you know?
Sort of set in their ways,
yes.
To change.
Families, I find sometimes for them, it's difficult because they come up with, not all of them, but I've heard, for me, they're very empty comments, what you say, voita. Like, isn't it just a matter of her eating the whole plate?
Why is it so difficult?
Because there's with the people who have anorexia, for example, they speak about somebody who tells them not to eat. It's not schizophrenia, that same type of voice, but it's like you have another individual telling you what to do or what not to do, controlling you basically.
Your super ego, okay, that consciousness.
Yes. And it's not that they don't want to. I mean, in the center where I work, sometimes the nutritionist prepares special meals for them with the fear food, for example, or they take them out to have their snack, we call it.
It's almost like a bit of exposure to what they're afraid of.
Yes, because once they're in the center, everything is contained, they eat and everything is prepared, they have meal plans and everything. But then when the reality lies, that when you go out into the big bad world,
it may not be so safe.
Your cousin is going to tell you, you're coming to my party. And for them, this is a big saga. Meals, weddings, drinks with friends, nibbles. For them, it's very difficult, whether you are anorexic or an overeater. I mean, the feeling of guilt, the shame comes in. Should I take? People are looking at me saying, I'm taking too much, The purges, for example, they explain that they do go to weddings and then they go to the bathroom. But then if they're being like this watched, they feel uncomfortable because they feel guilty that they let the family down. You know, so really and truly, I think we need to steer away from, or we introduce words like support, help, we're here for you, you know, whatever is important for you.
In fact, you just mentioned the family. Do eating disorders affect relationships? So, you know, we're talking about relationship with ourselves. What about the people?
Unfortunately, they do. I mean, this is one great difficulty, especially if they have a partner, especially the late teens, you know, that we bring the partner to explain. Because for them, going out for a pizza is the normalest thing for an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old to do, even a 15-year-old, let's go in, not have whatever, a burger, a milkshake, you know. But for them, it is a big thing, especially if it's very fearful, you know. It's a saga. And they, instead of enjoying the process, they go through another trauma because it's like, you know, the Maltese are afraid of cockroaches, or most of us are. I am.
Guilty.
Maybe I'm projecting here. You know, as soon as you see one, you just, you know, fear mode. So imagine these people are in a space where everyone else is relaxed, and you start thinking, why is it me like this? And they even feel more abnormal than they already feel. You know, already their mind, because it's a personality trait as well, that they tend to be more anxious. They tend to think and perceive that the world around them is more menacing. You know, it's like always on fight mode. Imagine how exhausting it is even on the plane.
Even if, you know, I just saw you now, you know, tensing your body as you were explaining. It's a person who's 24 hours in this constant state of pain.
And they get depressive modes as well. And you have to understand that it's really not their fault. They're doing their best, you know. That's why even at the place where we have here, the rehabilitation center, they don't just introduce them from zero eating, because some of them don't eat like an apple a day, or maybe nothing, you know. You can't just sit them down and say you have to eat. I mean, for them, it's that sometimes they take ages, just come to terms and they're crying. I mean, it's very emotional. So you have to be very patient, you know.
So it's very clear, it's not just physiological, there's a lot of psychology going on.
No, it's very psychological. And most of the patients, as I mentioned before, they need medical. They need to go to a psychiatrist who will prescribe something to help them with the overthinking, with the anxiety, with the fear, you know.
I mean, like a bit of a walking stick during this journey, something to help them along.
Yes, normally it takes, I mean, looking at the positive side, within a year or two, although it will always be a bit of an Achilles heel in a person's life, you know. But then what we teach them, especially as a psychotherapist, this is what I do. I empower them with tools. For example, if I know that I'm going somewhere where I'm anxious, how can I support myself not to let my anxiety override me, my emotions take over, zero emotional regulation, and I'm really stressed and I start hysterically to cry and I have a panic attack in the middle of a wedding, you know? So they're equipped with these little tiny tools, you know, which, for example, they can have a phrase where they say that I'm feeling safe now, it's okay. Or they tell their partner, for example, who, luckily enough, most of them support them, that they check up on them and they just touch their hand. They say, are you okay? Do you want to go out maybe? Because all this food is too much for you.
So this is what you were referring to, you know, the title, and understanding eating disorders and loving yourself in the process. So these little things, tips.
It's very hard for them to love themselves in the process. I mean, I in my experience with especially people who are anorexic, and sometimes last week, for example, we did an exercise where I just told them to think about one thing they love about themselves.
Right.
And most of them couldn't even do it. And then when you actually tell them something, and it must not be physical, or if it's physical, it's nothing got to do with this, maybe the eyes, you know, that you're strong, that you're resilient, you know, to be very careful. And it's very hard for them
To accept that they have these
it stays here.
positive qualities.
Yes, because they suffer a lot from what we call in jargon self-esteem. You know, it's like they think low about themselves. They feel they failed everybody around them, especially, I mean, they're separated from their families.
It's you know, as we're talking, it's reminding me of, you know, you're saying it's very hard for them to accept. And I'm just thinking it's very hard for them to almost accept the food as well, you know, metaphorically, the clinical is hand in hand.
Yes. So they repel anything which could potentially heal the mentioned missing puzzle, I call it. You know, and I say this even with my normal clients as a psychotherapist, that everybody has a missing piece which nobody can fulfill but you. The other pieces, yes, but there is one special piece that only you can. You know this as a psychotherapist too, you know, and it's very hard.
Okay. How do we help somebody with an eating disorder? So kidney stoning, which are actually at the bottom in an eating disorder. You know, it's quite, you know, you've spoken about it and it sounds very, very challenging. So, you know, what do you...
I would veer away from telling them, you know, stressing them to eat. You know, I think
putting pressure on them.
No, you cannot put pressure because then it drives them to their anxiety and they will implode and close off. They're already in denial in any case because if you give them a mirror, they tell you one shot. Because it's really the way they perceive themselves.
They're not saying what we think or their environment or their friends and family.
And having anorexia, for example, brings a lot of body. For example, the heart can shrink, the brain can shrink, the hair falls down. Up to them, it doesn't mean anything. So, innately, you go into the state, you're not seeing your hair, you're not seeing how much hair you have here because the body overcompensates, so you have a lot of hair. You're not seeing how your pants are shaped. These are not words to use. I would suggest that you support them and you say, listen, we are here for you. Or, of course, they're in denial, so you need to push them. I mean, there are cases when people have to go into a court order by force by psychiatrists, you know.
So mandated,
yes,
to go for rehabilitation.
Because it could lead to death, you know.
And this is the thing. This is you know, there's a lot of illnesses, but this is actually one that can be life-threatening.
I read how much of a percentage, but now it's not coming to me. But there's still I mean, you don't want to risk any sort of percentage, even if it's 1%. Why should you die out of something that potentially, if you're supported enough, you know, you can heal? And all clients are very important, you know, and we all want to do our utmost to help them, give them wings to start their journey out there, you know.
Treatment. So, you know, we're talking about how to help somebody with anything. So, you know, this is about helping them to change behavior and their mindset, yes. Treatment is, you know, what happens, you know, so we're talking about group therapy. But
there's an assessment. I think initially there is an assessment when they're admitted by the psychiatrist and by the nutritionist. They take what they call the BIA, like the body mass index, but I never really got into it because we're not supposed to mention it in the group. We cannot speak about any food in the group. It's not allowed. Food only in the kitchen, you know. So we keep very much to the rules. So this, although it's always mentioned, and they're very upset when it goes down because it means they're not so good, you know. It's very much based on that. And they have a meal plan. I mean, normal people who eat normal, I hate saying the word normal, but let's say the people who function well in this area, we eat a breakfast, ideally. And then maybe at lunch you have something smaller, depends. I mean, if you're not very rich, then eat a bit more, you know? And this is the way they do it in this way. So the person, it's basically addressing your need when you're hungry. And normally the body needs every 2 or 3 hours, you know? And you learn how to also snack. So there is the breakfast, and then there's a snack that they eat of their choice, which they like, you know, and then there's lunch, and then another snack, and then evening, you know. So they learn even how to be structured.
And that's it. I mean, food is central to our life, you know, to our how we communicate,
Yes.
and how we spend time with family and friends. So I
Celebrate.
guess there's these repercussions there, and when you're not functioning with food, it's going to affect relationships and the rest of your life quite strongly.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
Because couples, for example, it's very normal. You can say enough. I mean, first date normally,
Is a need.
cinema, and then or a meal. You know, so if you go to the cinema, don't you want popcorn? You know, already the anxiety will start. No, I don't, you know.
There seems to be a lot of hiding where eating disorders is concerned.
Yes, they do, because I think the process. There are 6 processes. I don't know the technical words, but the denial phase is very. I find it to be very long. And even if they have reached rock bottom, some of them still stay in the night. You know, they do, I mean, eventually, but it takes longer. And you can't push recovery in any formal manner, both sides, you know.
Do you notice the cycle? You know, so if somebody has taken some work to better themselves, do you notice that the cycle is, you know, they're doing well and then there's a dip?
There's always relapses, yes. They'll have triggers, especially if it's related to trauma and they choose not to address it, because what happens is, if there is a trauma present in the past, of course, and it is so painful for them, with this cohort, you need to touch base and withdraw. So it's not a normal therapy session like we know you have 50 minutes of pure, well, not, we don't connect for 50 minutes, but you know, we talk about difficulties for 50 minutes. With this cohort, you cannot do this. So you touch base and withdraw immediately. You know, when you see that they're getting too emotional, you have to withdraw because it will destroy them.
So it's almost like there's maybe a tendency to re-traumatize
Yes.
during the process.
Yes. And also sometimes because they're in a group, you also have to be sensitive. So the first thing you need to ask is, are there any colors that I cannot wear because it's happened to me? Are there any keywords that I cannot use? Because if you use them, freak out. And it could trigger them into the negativity. And as a psychotherapist, you need to be sensitive, non-judgmental, so whatever. So this is the first thing, especially if there's a new person in the group. I ask, is there something maybe I should know? Maybe if you can't verse it, you write it, or you tell someone else and they will tell you, maybe to be sure that you don't touch the pain, basically, because it will be too much for them. Because they're normally very sensitive even to their environmental. For example, what's happening around in the world, it hurts them deeply. I mean, I'm a lover of animals and the environment, you know, and it does hurt me. But I feel that this cohort, they feel the pain even more. It's like it's just towards them. It's like they're causing them pain, you know?
It's almost like a layer of their skin is exposed, so they're more susceptible to feeling with this type of...
To the shame, to the anxiety, especially anything that is linked to their trauma. And you can't just open trauma, you know this. So it has to be done very, very, very slowly.
So you also mentioned before that eating disorders don't actually discriminate as in gender, size, age. Is there a particular age that you notice here in Malta and that it's eating disorders is higher?
Teenage, 20, but mostly teenage. And when I say teenage, then late teens as well. But we've had people who were older who did not address it when they were young because they learned to live with it. And the family don't say anything.
So not having the right support or maybe not even recognizing that there is an issue. So just carrying on with life.
They just think it's a piece of their normal life, you know, or they diffuse it, for example, into an OCD, you know, and they just rush on.
I have this.
So they blame it all on that, not seeing that this is a result of what's happening here. You know, anything to diffuse it from the here. And I find as well they don't like to be not the center of attention, but if they don't feel like talking, for example, you can't push them. So there have been.
So you're saying you've been in a group therapy session and you do notice someone's a bit withdrawn,
And I
allow them to.
Because by allowing them, I am, and I always ask, though, I say, listen, would you like to contribute to the group? And they tell me, do you mind if not today? And I say, okay. And then slowly, by doing this, they come back into the group when they're not. Because if I push, you lose the control.
It seems to be like the opposite, just as we're talking, I'm just imagining this person in their family life where they're being pushed, eat, get up. So during the therapy session, you're saying, so giving them permission to say what is.
Addressing, like we say in psychotherapy, addressing your immediate need. So you don't want to talk, And then I ask at the end of the group, I say, is there something you liked or disliked? I always ask for feedback. And if they say no, it's okay. Or maybe I tell them, listen, would you like to make a painting instead? And generally I go, this is where youth work comes in. And also because I'm a trained actor, I use a lot of my acting skills in this. So with the role plays, because they project, and also when it gets too heavy, when we're touching the area of trauma, for example, then to diffuse, we do something funny.
Okay.
And generally, drama comes in, and even in drama, they you notice that they're projecting. So that as well, I can use it for next time.
And it sounds, using like drama therapy, it sounds a bit safe. So they're participating, but not fully there, so it feels a bit safer that they're not completely exposed.
And we play games, For example, they give feedback to each other. For example, we have this game, which they really, really like. And if you ask somebody and the person says, because I always check in, so how are you today? And the person, for example, says, I'm okay. So we have this game, said she or said he. And then I said she how? And you get this face like this. And in a funny way, the other said she in a very monotonial voice, not meaning what she's saying. So we really don't believe that she's okay. And then the person starts to diffuse it. And then we say, okay, how can we go from 5 to 7? What needs to be done? How can we support you? So you can come from the back door.
Instead of using going to the windows of the main door, but it reaches them.
You have to make sure that they enjoy it. They're teenagers, most of them. They're very, you're not coming in. They're quite a hard to trust, especially they're strong.
And it's like the exercises and the therapy that you're using in the group. I'm just getting the impression that they are seen. So obviously at home they're seen as, you're not eating enough. They're seeing what's happening on the outside. But it's like in this group therapy, they're able to be seen beyond that.
Yes. Still you have to do it slowly, because when they feel too much exposed, then they will feel
too much for them.
But I give them permission. We do this in gestalt. So we say, I give you permission to tell me I'm stopping. This is enough for me. And then you notice. Because generally they don't tell you. But then you ask, you say, I'm noticing that you're not comfortable with this. Would you like to stop? And I tell them either this or this, if it's too much for them even to articulate. And I think that makes them feel safe.
It's like going to the floor and you're really seeing them. Probably it's a very new experience for many of them to be seen in this way.
To be exposed as well. So that's why you have to be very careful. Because it is very delicate. But it's beautiful, For example, generally when they come in, they will they don't want to talk. And then as the weeks roll by, this personality starts to come out. And we do an assessment between us. We say, do you remember? I tell them, do you give me permission to tell you how I remember your first session or second? And they laugh, they tell me, "Mush well." And I say, it's true. You want to say hello to me? You don't remember? They say, yeah, it's true. And it's beautiful to see because they they flourish, they start to address their needs, they have an individual therapist there, the nutritionist, the nurse, the whole system, just the whole structure, you know.
Would you recommend group therapy for eating disorders over individual or both of them?
Because they also do art therapy, which is very important as well, because then the therapist can, obviously they're projecting and she sees the colors that they use, you know. And then I also use it. Sometimes they leave the art there on the table. And it's happened. And I say, okay, you don't feel like talking today, but can you show me what you did in the art this week? What did you do?
Use that as a meeting.
And then she says, you want to know what I did and what this is? And I say, how interesting. Yes, tell me. And they're willing to talk, but most of them are, you know.
And they're sharing something that they did themselves, you know, they participated in themselves.
I as a psychotherapist as well, not insist, but encourage a lot of journaling, even if they don't read it, because they say, well, then I read it, and it's really depressing. I don't read it. You're just getting rid of it. Keep it there. You know, and then 6 months down the line, you read and you say, for example, as a psychotherapist, I tell them, let's make goals of where we want to be within a month. You know, I would like to be more confident with myself. I would like to speak more.
And it's quite a short span. Is there a reason behind just giving them a month rather than?
Because if I tell them 6 months, they start to panic that they're going to be there 6 months.
Okay.
Because some of them do stay 6 months. So I say, let's talk about weeks, shall we? 4. Is 4 enough for you?
Easier to digest.
Then, especially if they're newcomers,
it's just too overwhelming. Before they start, they've already given up.
So targets, you know? So then even when they relapse, we go back to the list, you know? And we say, where are you going with all this even relapse and everything, going slowly towards your goal? And normally it's yes. Relapsing is part of the process, especially if you have a trigger. So let's work on the trigger. When the trigger comes again, what can we do to prevent it overtaking, and my emotion comes up again,
and you progress?
And I know how to emotionally regulate, and I am in charge of this. This is what it's all about, you know, of my thoughts and what your new neuropaths basically, which is my favorite, and thinking positive and creating new pathways, kicking in the dopamine and oxytocin, because a lot of them, unfortunately, the receptors are what they are, you know.
And you're only talking to me about persons who are that they have an eating disorder, questions that they should ask themselves. Do you have a list? I don't know if you want to share this with our viewers.
We can share it as well on the after. For example, if you're noticing that you're lying about food, you're hiding, you're avoiding areas where there's food, or for example, you're invited to dinner and you say, no, I've already eaten at home, these type of things, you know, or I'm not hungry, or I'm really feeling sick, these type of excuses which
are prolonged. This is not, I mean, sometimes we have, you know, I think was in fact the difference between normal eating and, let's say, binge eating. You know, we all have you know, it's Christmas or a birthday where we've gone overboard with our food. So the difference between that and an eating disorder of, you know, like normal eating and binge eating.
Okay, so when people who do not have an ED, we eat extra one day, maybe 3-4 days, and then we're capable of saying, you know what, I'm not having this anymore. I know this is a period, like when you go on holiday, you tend to eat a lot more. And then after you come back,
it's about having added an extra 5 kilos, you know, after a week or two of holiday.
The overeaters cannot. The overeaters eat their normal meal if they're having a really good day. Okay, so eating structured. And then they might wake up even in the middle of the night and raid the whole fridge, and they go from sweet to sour, milk to whatever comes to their mind, you know? I mean, I've had clients sitting in the fridge, opening the fridge and just gorging, you know? until they literally nearly feel sick. The stomach cannot take it anymore. Or they go to the corner store, they buy a whole bag of whatever they're into at the moment. Normally it's food they don't eat normally. And they binge all of it until it's finished. But it's ongoing. It's not like I did it today.
In fact, like treating yourself or being less responsible once in dinner.
Yes, in fact, that's why when they do the eating plans, they introduce the nutritionist. She introduces sweets and snacks on purpose. So you are not depriving yourself of anything that your body needs.
So it's not, we're not talking about, it's otherwise it almost sounds like a punishment.
Yes. Because this is what the overeaters do then. No, I've been really good for a week. And then they go on a binge, and then once, for example, they have a binge early in the morning, then the whole day I just binge. I lost the whole day. This is how they operate. Now I'm going to eat the whole day, so I won't stop. It doesn't operate like this. If you wake up in the morning, you have a huge breakfast. You normally, lunchtime, you say, no, I'm too full, maybe I'll have a soup. They don't do this. Come lunch, they'll have even something, or they just don't stop eating. Or they eat secretly. Or, for example, they throw away food, they fish it out of the bin, and they eat it again. I mean, for people who hear this, they tell me, yeah, but
the compulsion is so rare.
And yeah, you have to. So they put them in bags, for example, throw it away, and then they go back to it. Even if they don't put them in bags, they eat it. So if there are these signs, I encourage people to support, because there is help out there. And yes, you can heal from this, because it's like an addiction. You wake up in the morning thinking about food. It's all food. It's all you think about. Nothing else. It's like you're driven or not driven by the food. It's not a way of life.
One of the questions I had, but we've actually covered it, is whether therapy can actually make a difference. So you've spoken about what's done in therapy, but just in your opinion, somebody, one of our viewers is watching us and they're thinking and may have a problem, or know someone who has a problem. What are your words of?
It will be the first step to address it, because then if you have a chemical imbalance, then obviously you need medication or the obsessive thoughts. But we have had clients that with therapy, they have managed it. Not all the people who can't need medication. Okay, so I don't like putting things in boxes. But psychotherapy, there is mirror therapy, there's CBT,
So different approaches
yes, I think what suits the person best, where they feel more comfortable. And they're not going to feel 200% comfortable in the beginning, because addressing something that you've been doing for many years. Or,
or if you're mandated, you still haven't accepted that you need help.
No, it's not accepted. Some of them do actually say, I have to do something about this, but then lack the will. So you need to support them even more.
So maybe some final tips on how to for somebody, so not the person who has an eating disorder, but somebody who knows somebody who is going through it. So we just mentioned now, sort of supporting them by telling them that therapy is available. Any other ideas that somebody, a mother, noticing that her child is rapidly losing weight or maybe putting on weight, and some tips for the
I would find the opportune time, and very gently address the issue instead of saying, listen. They can actually say, listen, I've noticed that your weight has been fluctuating a bit, and I'm concerned. How about we go to somebody who maybe can give us a bit of a more expert advice? You can start with the family doctor, actually.
Okay. So
because most people, if you tell them I'm going to a psychiatrist, they freak out. No, even to a psychotherapist, they freak out a lot. Because there's this misconception. act of having, you know, maybe because I work in the field, for me it's normal that if you have a chemical imbalance, and yes, you need for a while, not forever, you know. So I would address it in a very gentle way, ideally, because sometimes it has to be done forcefully.
I was reading up, and there's this tendency for the partner to feel it's their fault. And then there is the person suffering, they feel it's their fault.
Yes.
So is it anybody's fault at the end of the day?
Nobody's fault, really, because it's mental health, and mental health is not something you plan to have. You know, it's your brain. And in fact, I was reading about that there's a new research coming out now, they're still researching it, that they're finding out that it could be that their brain, and this cohort, their brain could be wired slightly, you know, because they tend to be more anxious, more full of shame. So they tend to go to that place again, you know. And this is what psychotherapy does. We rewire this. But when you have the trigger, you don't go down the same path of shame, anger, and that. You create a new path that says, you know what? I did the best I could at the time. You know what? This is not my fault. I am not to blame. I'm doing the best I can. And at this moment, today, this is the best I can do. Because nobody is perfect. You know?
Would you recommend any, maybe we can put them up on the site later on, any books, people to read about eating disorders, or you think that's a bit of a, would be a trigger at the same time? So maybe for the carers, for the people around them.
There's a lot available on the internet as well, you know. But again, just because your daughter is skipping one meal here and there, let's not go into panic mode, because a lot of people tend to go into panic mode. You know, I'm a mother, and I know how we mothers sometimes tend to go. So be careful, because sometimes even though on internet there's a lot of information, I would go to the professionals and ask, because there's a lot of people who fortunately on this little island are very well versed in the area. Psychiatrists, psychotherapists, play therapists, drama therapists, you name it, we have it, you know, and they have a lot of experience, you know, nutritionists, there's a whole center who offers this.
To reach out for the resources available locally, they're like you're saying, there's quite a few.
And maybe if they want to support it, they can go to a therapist. If they cannot address it themselves, and ask the therapist to say, please support me, and to telling her how I'm concerned, you know, because sometimes, you know, this is a therapist too. When there is a mediator in between, it's not your mother telling you, listen, you need to address this, especially in teenage.
Sometimes it's a bit of a shutdown.
I mean, in youth work, we learned this. I remember the lecturer had told us that the first thing you need to learn about the puberty, which is this area, mostly that's the onset of the eating disorders, it's like you grab somebody's life, turn it upside down, and he has to make sense of it. You know? So whatever your parents or carers gave you, you're going to have to question, because they gave it to you. And this is a time in puberty where you question.
This autonomy to find out for ourselves.
Identity versus role confusion of Eric Erickson. No? This is what it is. So maybe if you have a mediator, they can help you, because it's not your mom or your dad or your carer telling you. Yeah. Easier transition, maybe.
So I think that's it for today. We're coming to the end of the program. We're hoping to set up a few more sessions with YMCA later on. Should you have any questions, please drop us a line on the YMCA website, and we'll be happy to support you. We're going to switch to motifs. Wasalna fit-tmiem tal-programmi ta' sensiela Let the Sunshine In. Personalment tal-għattu l-istadina tagħna llum. Mhux vera m'għandhomx ma narawkom darb'oħra għall-sensiela ta' programmi ġodda. Grazzi Isabel, forsi kemm tgħid tal-aħħar.
Jiena xtaqt naqra xi ħaġa minn ktieb ta' Louise Hay. Però bl-Ingliż.
Okay, so we're just having a short.
Because this encapsulates eating disorders for me, and I think it really encapsulates beautifully. So in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole and complete. I now choose calmly and objectively to see my old patterns, and I am willing to make changes. I am teachable, I can learn, I am willing to change. I choose to have fun doing this. I choose to react as though I have found a treasure when I discover something else to release. I see and feel myself changing moment by moment. Thoughts no longer have any power over me. I am the power in the world. I choose to be free. All is well in my world.
That's really beautiful. And it's true. It really does.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. Thank you
Thank you
to our
very much.
viewers, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again later on this year. Thank you.